Hello, everybody. My name is Sherilyn Simpson, and today I would like to discuss with you one of my favorite constructionalist theories, and I think is most interesting and utmost pivotal to our society in its entirety, and that happens to be the labeling theory. Now, briefly, let me discuss its origin, and its origin, according to Taylor and Schwartz, 2012, the labeling theory was discovered by a group of sociologists in the early 1960s. And this same group of sociologists are acknowledged today as the labeling theorists, which I am in utmost agreement with. According to these labeling theorists, they rely on two ideas that are derived from symbolic interactionism. And interestingly, the ideas themselves are the words symbolic interactionism related to deviance. Let me explain. First, we'll start with interaction. Interaction and deviance are related because interaction is collective action, and deviance has to be, in other words, a collective act. In other words, just like every activity, human activity is collective. And we can say either collective or we can say pluralistic. In other words, that deviance, the acts of deviance involve more than the act of one person. Now, according to the labeling theorists, when determining deviant behavior, instead of, like as the positives do, looking directly at the individual performing the deviant behavior, that one must look beyond that and look at the interaction of that particular behavior. Now, let me explain the second idea, and this will bring it together. Just like pieces of a puzzle, we're going to get the whole picture. Hopefully shortly, right? Sooner than later. Now, the word symbolic and symbolic interactionism is relative to deviance. It means it is not important, the deviant behavior in itself. What is of utmost importance is what is attached symbolically to that alleged deviant behavior. And when we say symbolic, we can talk about anything from signs, gestures, interpretations, definitions, and labels. Now, to give you an example of how this all pulls together so you'll have a better comprehension of what I've just previously told you before we go forward, let me give you this example that was employed by Taylor and Schwartz, 2012. Picture this, and it is a true story. It was a typical day at Ohio State University. The professor was in the classroom, conducting his normal routine, pacing and walking up and down the aisles, being observant, checking on the students who had their laptops on their desk. And you know, he was making sure they were doing their work and looking on at the literature, whatever they were supposed to do on their computers. And like the professor noted, that it wasn't unusual for him to walk by and see his students looking at Facebook, at Twitter, Skype, and all other things like that. But however, on one particular day, he walked by one of his students. On this particular day, he walked by one of his students' desk, and he saw something that he never saw before. And he asked the student, inquisitively, he asked him, he said, "What is that you're looking at? Or what is that you are playing?" The student replied and said, "Well, I'm playing a game called Farmland." And he explained to his professor that Farmland is a game intended to take an individual out of the other everyday reality, fast paced. I call it the 3 C's: confusion, confliction, chaos, chaotic city life, and take them into a more pleasurable environment, even if it is temporarily, more peaceful, more calm, more serene, like the replication of the title of the game, like on a farmland. Well, a second student responded and said, well, I play the game because it gives me a sense of belonging to a larger community. Well, the last person responded and told not only the professor, but their fellow classmates too. Listen, you guys, I heard about that game Farmland, and I heard that in China, there are billions of people that are addicted to that game, so you better be careful. While all this was going on, the professor started recollecting of an article that he read previously in the New York Newsweek weekly newspaper, April 19th, 2010, and it was titled Back to the Land: Why Chinese Happy Farmers Took Off. Coincidentally, the name of the game, which is equivalent to the Farmersville game that the sociology students were playing in the United States, was called the same name as the article. Why back to the land? Why Chinese happy farmers took off. So as you can see here, the symbolic attachment, which they deemed being deviant behavior for them, Chinese nationals playing the game. Now, the Chinese nationals said, and it's important to mention that the responses given by the students in the sociology class in the United States at Ohio State University were comparatively similar or the same to the ones that the Chinese nationals gave. Yet, in China, the Chinese nationals were called deviant and we're going to discuss this in a minute, who are the labelers. By the labelers, because regardless of their wanting to get out of their environment temporarily, no matter how bad it was being, have a peace of mind, well, was interfering with the production at work. Production was decreasing, and distractions were increasing. And so instead of acknowledging now how powerful words are, like psychological abuse, words are very powerful. Instead of saying you're deviant, you're going to be punished. Listen, I am in agreement. If a student is in the classroom and you're in a certain environment, there are certain things that you need to do and need not to do that are appropriate and that are inappropriate, that are tolerable and intolerable, such as talking on your cell phones, playing games on your laptops, on your iPads, or whatever you're doing. In the work environment, the same thing. If it interferes with your responsibilities, that's one thing. Even if it does, there's an appropriate means of handling that. Okay, you don't punish them and lock them in jail and say and physically punish them. You are a deviant. Look, this is inappropriate behavior. While you're at work, this is not going to be tolerated. If you persist to continue to do this, you will be terminated. Instead of just calling the person deviant, you need to be locked up and throw away the key. Well, the labelers of the Chinese nationals, well, the consequences for them in this case was like the boomerang effect, because they thought it was going to stop the behavior, but the behavior has continued to steadily increase. Now you can see how symbolic is tied to the alleged deviant behavior. Now when you talk about who are the labelers, who are these people, and what entitles these people or legitimizes these people to label anybody? Now, it usually, well, in the United States, well, everywhere, they are the most powerful. And the most powerful are usually the top 1% elite class. In the United States, the top 1% elite class, excluding a few, are Caucasian. And Caucasian men at that. You can call it gendered. And what they deem as being deviant is those that don't abide by the law and conventional morality. And those that who are alleged not to abide in these laws and conventional morality, they are deemed as deviant. But notably, this is utmost important. I don't know if you've ever heard of the quote or phrase, "How can the pot kettle black?" Well, here's one of the circumstances you can ask that question. That top 1% elite class are the ones that are involved in the type of crimes which supersede an economic loss and in the deaths of innocent people more so than all the crimes, even street crimes combined. And those are what you call white-collar crimes by that upper elite class of individuals. And who legitimizes them to be entitled to call another individual that is of lower stature or of lower social economic status as them as being deviant? Well, let me explain. The consequences of doing this, first let me tell you this. The people that it primarily happens to, the majority of the people are African American, people of color, and the poor. And mind you, there are poor equally or some more so Caucasian and every other race in the United States of America. And to keep those individuals further oppressed, they feel it, deem it necessary to keep them believing and keep them in this deviant, oppressive status. Okay? And what this does, the consequences for them, is it protects their interests. And let me take a wild guess. Would that be capitalism? And to keep social order, but not for them, because the laws don't pertain to them. They pertain to the people that they feel are beneath them, which they're really not. They may have some more money, but was the money honestly earned? White-collar crime? Leaves room for thought. Let's think about that one. Let's move forward. Okay, according to Frank Tannenbaum, now let's describe the two different types of deviance. And according to Frank Tannenbaum, 1938, there are two phases of it. First, we're going to talk about that. The first one is called the first act. The first act, for example, is when an innocent child, for instance, does something that all children is not, it wouldn't be considered deviant to an average individual. It's something that is normalcy, part of normalcy that usually happens at children at that particular age, especially for the boys and the girls now. I was a tomboy when I was growing up, but picking up a rock, throwing rocks, not deliberately breaking windows. You have some that are into vandalism, but that usually happens when they become adolescents or, whatever. And the child thinks that their behavior is innocent. Okay, but the parent deems it as deviant. And the second one is the final act. The final act is when both the child and the parent deems the behavior as being deviant. Now, let's go to the two types of deviance according to Frank Tannenbaum, 1938. Primary. The primary deviance. Now both types of deviance are temporal. And when I say temporal, that means one happens before the other and one occurs more frequently than the other. So let's start with primary, which occurs only one time. And when it occurs, although society thinks that their behavior is deviant, that individual does not. Now, secondary deviance is much different in that when it happens, when they're labeled as deviant, they accept the deviant, they adopt the deviant behavior, and society deems it as deviant behavior. So they adopt the label of being deviant, and then the behavior is recurrent. It's repeated and continuous over and over again. So this is how they live. For instance, here's a good example. A person goes to prison. They're called an ex-con. So when they get out into society, they're labeled as an ex-con. Everywhere they go, they're tagged as an ex-con. That's like, whether we know it or not, we are all tagged. That's why we have a social security number. We're branded just like cattle. That's how cattle are branded. Everybody has a number. Interesting. But this is secondary deviance. Now, this is the point that I'm trying to make. The problem, second deviance to me, all of deviance to me, all labeling is bad. All labeling is bad. And I'm going to tell you why. Being a human being first, and a psychology major second, it would be an interesting study to just ask people, which form of abuse, is it physical abuse, sexual abuse, or psychological abuse, that has the most dire consequences for anybody? Doesn't matter race, creed, age, gender, sexual orientation, what they would actually say. Now, I don't know if anybody has ever experienced those, but I'm here to say I have. And my answer was still wrong. It is actually psychological abuse, which has the most dire repercussions and consequences for any individual. And those come with words. Could you imagine a child, or adult for that matter, you're worthless, you'll never amount to anything, you're not worthy of love, nobody wants you. Well, I guess a child is probably, in that phase of child development, would take ownership or adopt that label, or anybody for that matter, especially somebody that already does not have what I would call a strong constitution that I do. Because if I didn't, I wouldn't be making this video right now. But I can't tell you all that because then you won't buy my novel. But words are utmost powerful. And we need to be this. I chose the labeling theory because this is important, and we need to all take heed of what it does. It could be you, it could be me, it could be your family, your children, your loved ones, extended family, whoever it is that's going through that. And what can we do to change that? How can somebody who is given innately the power, the authority, legitimation and that commits the majority of crimes and is responsible for the majority of all our economic losses and all of innocent deaths of people, be it via pharmaceuticals, be it via contaminated food, be it via pollution, be it via failed infrastructure for embezzlement, keeping to make themselves richer than what they already are. So now that I got that off my chest, I hope that I have given you an accurate interpretation and description and the correlation relations between interaction, deviance. No, symbolic, interaction first, deviance. We're going to do it backwards, vice versa. And symbolic and deviance. So we have symbolic interaction, the labeling theory. And I want to thank you all for taking out your time and watching my video. And I hope I did you a great service. And I just want you to think about it. And if anybody has anything to add to this video, it'd be just great. Because this is something that, you know, we all need to talk about, and I think it affects all of us one way or the other. And that, you know, labels, there should not be any. And if the labels are placed on somebody, the ones that are doing the majority of the crime shouldn't be placing labels on people that are probably the majority of time not even doing them at all. And just a means of keeping them oppressed. And capitalism, all capitalism is, the top 1%, you know, they call them ex-cons, but the recidivism rate, that's what they depend on. They depend on this labeling to keep them oppressed, to keep them going back into prison, to keep money in their pocket. This is coming out of our hard-earned money that we're paying taxes for to keep these people locked up. It means of putting money in their pocket. Because if you look at how much it costs to keep a person in prison per day and see what they're actually getting, it's 1/2 cent on the dollar. Now, who's getting the rest of it? So let's address this issue. Let's really investigate this issue and stop just talking about it and see if there's something that we can do about it. And again, I hope I did you a great service. And if I didn't, I assure you next time that I will do a much better job. And until then, may God bless each and every one of you, and may you have a blessed week. Thank you very much. Goodbye.